At this point, we're going to begin the morning after that lovely music by Wade Fernandez that we had out in the atrium. And we're going to begin with our flag ceremony.
Uwena baju and away magana do not away benezi indigenous cause na main dem on a shnabiandao neopit indonjaba, the place I am from. A very good morning to you and welcome to the Marquette Law School, this Andrew Center for Restorative Justice Conference. We're glad you're here. And we're glad Marquette won yesterday. I have it on good authority that our Dene relatives will be making snow angels with the School of Dentistry later on. And for those of you that are Marquette students in law school, the snow fight between dentistry and the law school is now off. You are to stay here and not participate in those shenanigans later on. So just a good humorous and a good humored welcome to each and every one of you. My English name is Mark Denning. I've been asked to start today by our veterans from the Stockbridge-Munsee community, and it's so awesome to see them. And as is with many of our programs in Native country, we begin with a small but important recognition of Thanksgiving, and welcome to each of you in this way. We're going to have a entry of sorts, and we're going to be bringing in Eagle staffs and the national colors of our great country and that of the Stockbridge-Munsee community. So veterans, welcome to each and every one of you. If everyone, please, might rise. And singers, welcome to you and good morning. You could begin. We'd like to ask each and every one of you to please sit down for a moment As is customary in Native country, we usually begin with a prayer for our opening. So I'm just going to say a few small things in recognition, and we're going to go to our program. So again, Nuena Buju, to all that is, to all that was, and to all that ever will be, we send our greetings. To all my relations, Nadawe Benezi, Indigenous cause, that thunderbird in the sky and the one that's on the ground, my name, Nadawe Benezi, Indigenous cause, Neme Indodem, Sturgeon Clan. I come to you today and this morning when we give thanksgiving for each and everything that is around us, for all the ones who move through the earth as easily as we move through the air, to the ones on this earth that move with us. And in this way, we memorialize those who have passed on in our winter time, and we give thanksgiving for the seasons to come. We give thanksgiving also as we descend to the midst of our earth and remember that child of the sun that burns brightly underneath us. Remember the waters of the earth, remember the lands of the earth. And in remembering the lands, remember the ones that are on her. We remember our insects, we remember our birds, their songs they use to lift our minds when we are sad. We remember the animals and the trees in each and every one of the plants, and the head of these plants, both the pine tree and the strawberries that are coming. We also remember the ones of the air, the ones that are above us, and we recognize each and every one of their colors and their duties and responsibilities as they fly on that beautiful migration that is created above us and in our rivers. And in recognition of these things of our earth, we recognize each and every one of the stars that give us direction in all that we do. And we recognize the one above all of us. We are reminded that all prayers go to the same place. We are reminded of one word, of respect to each other, respect for ourselves, and respect to the one who made us. Honey. Veterans, if you might post your colors, that would be awesome. How about a good round of applause for them? So we do appreciate that in different parts of Indian country. Sometimes we're sitting, sometimes we're standing. We never really know quite what to do. So I just default to land-based education, meaning we're in Potawatomi country, so we're kind of do the things as they do in that area. We want a good recognition for our singers. Very much appreciated. Veterans, if you might just stand right by your post there, and we're going to do a flag song in recognition of our flag. So let's stand again once more. Be seated. Today is a very special morning. We're going to bring to you our good welcome in just a moment. But before we do that, as we're gathered here, in the name of justice, we are reminded, veterans, that it is the failure of justice when we call on our soldiers. When we call on them, it is both the just and the unjust whose lives are taken. And it is soldiers that do that work. So as Native people, when we're standing for them, there's healing in each and everything we do. And to do that, what I'd like to do is our veterans, and I include President, that's how I see you. I'm gonna ask each and every one of you just come here and your name and your service, please.
Kolomasi ni de shinzi ki shokwik bokwa ni nonjia I Mohican. My name is JoAnn Shedler, and I am a Marquette graduate, nursing 82, and I was in Iraq and Desert Storm and Iraqi Freedom, and I'm a retired Army nurse. Anushikunewi.
Kolomasi. I am Rick Turtelot, a Marquette grad, 1987, College of Arts and Sciences. I am a retired lieutenant colonel, having served in the Iraqi campaign. Thank you.
Kolomasi, my name is Larry Hill. I'm a retired Marine, 25 years. I retired as a Master Gunnery Sergeant, and I'm happy that we could be here and honor this occasion. Thank you.
Kolomasi, good morning. My name is Shannon Holsey. I'm the president of the Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohican Indians, and I serve my people.
Warriors are more than just soldiers. They're each and every one of you that stand for the law and work for the law. So to each and every one of you, a beautiful good morning. Thank you. And now we're going to go to Joseph, if you might come forward. There he is. We're going to do a welcome, and certainly. Thank you.
Good morning. Marquette University Law School has been holding conferences for even longer than the 20 years that I've been dean, and indeed probably more than a century. I would say that while I scarcely speak with respect to those things that preceded me, I doubt there has ever been a more humbling and more inspiring beginning of any conference at Marquette University. And we are so humbled and inspired by your presence and your participation. Ordinarily, I would say let's go ahead and begin today's conference, Restorative Justice in Indian Country, Speaking the Truth, Instilling Accountability, and Working Toward Healing. Yet, of course, we have already begun, and so inspiringly, with the wonderful ceremony involving the veterans and the singers. My name is Joseph Kearney, and it's a great privilege for me as Dean of Marquette University Law School to welcome you this morning in a relatively prosaic way. This is my basic responsibility at this conference, to provide a number of welcomes and innumerable thank yous. I am most glad for all of it. I have welcomed you to Marquette University and our law school, and for an early thank you, I'm grateful for the good judgment of our provost and other university leaders in not closing down campus today, despite the snow. Let me welcome you also to Eckstein Hall, our home of the past dozen plus years, and to our Lubar Center, this splendid room, which helps us advance our commitment to public policy research and civic education. To move closer to the substance of today's work, I welcome you also to, or on behalf of, our Andrew Center for Restorative Justice. This is the newest of the various things that I have mentioned: the university, the law school, the building, and the like. Just over a year ago, thanks to the extraordinary generosity of Louis and Sue Andrew, both 1966 graduates of Marquette University and particular friends of the law school. I'm looking straight at Sue Andrew, 4 rows back, beautiful in blue. Thanks to their extraordinary generosity, we were able to formalize and perpetuate the longtime interest and work of my colleague, distinguished professor and retired Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Janine Geske, in restorative justice. You will hear more from Janine and about our Andrew Center, no doubt, in a few minutes. Before that, though, permit me to extend my thank yous. Most of the welcomes I can specify, the on behalf of sort of thing. Yet, I mentioned that the thank yous are innumerable. Yes, I can identify this colleague or that, such as Associate Dean Christine Wilczynski-Vogel, who led the efforts on our end. But the thank yous truly run to all of you, especially those whom I am just getting to know, people who, with no previous particular tie to us, have elected to travel some distance and through the bad weather, seeking to teach us and hoping to learn themselves. Underlying our Andrew Center may be, in particular, the Catholic Jesuit mission of Marquette University, yet today I would emphasize that we are Catholic, if you will, in where we find learning and inspiration. In my own earliest informal tutorials about restorative justice, as I got to know Janine upon my joining the faculty some 25 years ago, I learned, for example, how the circles practice in restorative justice draws on Native American traditions and customs. So the thank yous, as we've already heard with the references to the ancestors, run far back in time even. I have an idea that the thank yous also will extend far into the future. We have our own formal plans involving the arrival in a couple of months of the Honorable Mary Trigiano, Chief Judge of the Milwaukee County Circuit Court, as Director of the Andrew Center, Janine's successor. Judge Trigiano is ready to be here, and any doubt that the Milwaukee County Circuit Court is ready to see her go, please don't misinterpret this statement, can be seen in the fact that the courts were ordered closed this morning without any consultation of the Chief Judge. So it is a seamless and most impressive transition. So those are some things that we know. There will be much more that we don't yet know, but today and hereafter can begin to imagine. In fact, already yesterday in informal conversations, a few of you and I began envisioning further common cause that we can make down the road. I am very optimistic about that and grateful for that too. So truly, welcome and thank you. And without more, let me turn things over to Janine Geske. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning. Thank you all for coming. What looked to be worse than it really is, the snow out there. And I want to also thank all the people who are dialing in and streaming and watching us from a variety of places, both in Milwaukee and around the country. I am thrilled about this conference. And as Joe just indicated, I was so moved this morning between the music with Wade Fernandez out in the atrium forum, and then this wonderful, wonderful beginning with the flag ceremony. And I, too, am very grateful both to the veterans and to the singers. It was a great way to start and get our hearts in the right place. I've told some people, I've been doing restorative justice for a long time, as Joe indicated, and we have put on a number of conferences through the years. We were called an initiative. We were a temporary sort of activity at the law school. We had courses and things, but when I retired last time, this is going to be my second retirement from here, third retirement actually, we continued to have conferences, but I had always wanted to do this conference. And so to me, I'm going to get emotional, this is the inaugural conference for the Andrew Center, because it's our first one, and I really wanted to bring in and do homage and also learn particularly from our Native partners and about restorative justice and the healing and the bringing back in the community and some of the really profound values of Native Americans that influence those of us that do restorative justice. And I thought there was no better way than to dedicate an entire day to doing that. So I want to thank everybody for traveling and coming and being part of this. I too will thank everybody, but I do want to do a shout out, and I don't know if Christine's in the room, but I don't know, we'd all be here if it weren't for Christine. I was texting back and forth at 4:30 this morning with her saying, I assume you're up, and she kept us straight, and she got the emails out, and everything else. So, if you have a chance to thank her personally, please do. She does a great job. And there are many other thank yous that I will talk about at the end of the conference. Our Andrew Center has plans and hopes and dreams to work with the community in new and different ways to bring restorative justice to processes. We've had discussions with corrections. We've worked with the Department of Corrections for a long time in doing programming in the prisons, working with survivors of crime. One of my speakers that came to Green Bay Prison with me for a long time, Maida Kreitz, I don't know where's Maida, is here in the audience today. We will continue working with youth in schools because that is important. Mary is very dedicated. She has initiated and overseen treatment courts in Milwaukee County. There's a veterans court. There are domestic violence courts. There are 2 courts out of children's court to help parents who are losing their children, to try to support them and be able to get their children returned to them. And there are treatment court for children who need support. There's also domestic violence court and other courts. So Milwaukee County, those are all new since I left the bench in Milwaukee. And it's its own way of trying to bring back the community, which I find so strong in the Native traditions. We also have had discussions with the Milwaukee Police Department, and they are interested in us doing some training and working side by side with them. And I'm very excited with that because everybody in this room knows that there's a lot of work to be done with community and police and survivors. And so we will work on that. But we will continue to have our conferences, and we do every year or every year and a half or so, and you're now on our mailing list, so you will hear about our future conferences. But today, this conference is different than any of the conferences we've run before because I have a wonderful advisory committee, some of whom are here, and we've kind of always fashioned who we were going to bring in and who we were going to talk. And this, I wanted to really, Jacqueline Schramm, who joined with us early on. Many of you know Jacqueline. And Jacqueline helped us reach out, and we talked to a number of people. And really the reason for the conference and the heart and soul of the conference is to look at those practices, values, traditions of Natives on what we call restorative justice. It's often not called that. And to help take us through experiences. So we have just wonderful speakers today. I'm not going to spend any more time other than you should have picked up when you walked in all the efforts, and Jacqueline's been spearheading this, all the Native American activities on campus. And it goes everywhere from a marker on campus that's being developed to admissions-related issues, we redid the seal of Marquette University to show the true relationship between Indigenous people and Father Marquette. It was off balance badly. So, the Board of Trustees, of which I was a part when this happened, voted to change it after a lot of input from a lot of people in terms of what that seal should look like. We've done the land and water acknowledgement, which is you can see on the website, but which is important to know that we are in Indian land, and we know that. And some of the other activities that are really wonderful on campus. We've got a lot of things, and to me, this conference is another kickoff of an opportunity to partner. So I don't want to take more time. I think I've already gone past my time. So I'm going to introduce Shannon. You saw Shannon. She stood in this morning for one of our veterans who couldn't make it, but obviously somebody who does great service, not only to her community, but the greater community. Shannon was elected to a 2-year term as president of the Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohican Indians in October of 2015, following 8 years as a member of the Tribal Council. She's the youngest to ever lead the Stockbridge-Munsee and has committed the tribe to serving as good stewards of its economic, environmental, and culture, and committed the tribe to serving as good steward and tradition as well as intellectual resources. She also serves as vice president of the Great Lakes Intertribal Council, which represents 11 member tribes with a land base of about 1 million acres spanning 45 counties. She is appointed as the Wisconsin State Legislature's Special Committee on State Tribal Relations, co-founder of Midwest Region, Woodland Women, the WEWIN We Win chapter. So I'm going to turn over to this Shannon so she can welcome you and talk a little bit about the conference and things we're going to do. So thank you, and Shannon.
Did they move them? My remarks were here. Maybe you took them? My remarks?
Oh, did I grab your remarks? I'm not giving them, so. I'm sorry, Kate.
Oh, no worries. Well, Kulamasi, good morning, and thank you for that warm welcome, Honorable Geske and Dean Kearney. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. And just as a precursor, I'm just a nonconformist because I did, after all, go to Seton Hall. So just to let you know that. But it's a pleasure to be here today to discuss an important topic as somebody who has the pleasure of serving my tribal nation with regards to restorative justice. And restorative justice comes in many different terms, especially in Indigenous nations. Stockbridge-Munsee is one of 11 federally recognized tribes in the state of Wisconsin. You heard the Honorable Geske talk about land acknowledgement, but I think as a tribal leader, I think oftentimes people don't realize that Native American tribes actually are not just race-based, we're political bodies. We're named in the U.S. Constitution, and so we have a trustee and a government-to-government relationship with the United States. And I constantly remind Governor Evers that we are not sub-sovereigns to the state of Wisconsin, and he always conveys that he understands. And we are very fortunate to have a governor at this time and place that actually does understand sovereignty and the exercise of it, because sovereignty really is just, it's actionable. It's an adjective. And so with that said, when we think about restorative justice, we also think about the terms that it goes by. For me, restorative justice isn't just restorative justice. It means so much more to all of us. It regards, equity to and access to quality health care, education, behavioral health, clean water, all of those things. All of those things are restorative justice and social justice, and certainly it requires parity and equity. You know, as tribal nations, you know, and when we think about restorative justice systems, you know, as conveyed, we have a dynamic group of people here today to really expound on that. I said to Honorable Geske, I said, thank God I get to go first, because I don't want to go behind attorneys, technocrats, and people that are subject matter experts, because clearly I am not one. But really what it is the concept of restorative justice is really to reestablish harmony more than just looking at punitive ways to adjudicate conflict. And how do we do that? And how do we, if you understand the dynamics of tribal nations, we are self-governing, we have our own constitutions, ordinances, and laws, and then we are also, there's duality to who we are. We're first citizens of our tribal nations, but we are also citizens of the United States, so it's a complex system that we navigate, you know, and so today I'd just like to provide a little perspective of what that looks like, you know, and I think we have to just start the day by contextually recognizing, you know, the doctrine of discovery and what that really means. You know, there's one thing to acknowledge land, but there's another to really understand how that land was acquired. And through the doctrine of discovery, how that happened in those ethos with Europeans regarding the colonization, the discovered, I think the narrative that Native Americans tell are much different, because we already inhabited the land, so there wasn't a discovery of anything but new people that inhabited the land. So when we look at that doctrine of discovery, and we have to acknowledge how we are at a place in time where there are, and not just Native Americans, but many communities of color, the need for restorative justice, it's because our country was founded on a position of people that were not like us, and they weren't inclusive of the people that would govern them. And so when you think about that, you know, and the imposed conquering of how that looked, you know, you look at the manifesting of destiny, it grew out of those legal elements and policies of that doctrine discovery. So, Thomas Jefferson looked at that, and really what it was is a imposing and an acquisition of land and imposing of laws to govern that. So it is an elusive history that the Native American tribes share with the United States government, and and coincidentally and ironically, as we founded our forefathers founded this country, they enlisted the 7 Iroquois nations to help fashion the U.S. Constitution. So we were already established people long before Europeans made first contact in the United States. So I really think that it's important to remember that, because Native American communities and all communities have something to offer the United States. And we're at a time and place where things are, I'm hopeful and faithful that things will move in the right direction, but it really requires, those boots on the ground, restorative, people, collaborators that are going to help us move that needle, because there's a lot that has to happen. You know, the way that we govern, the way that we treat one another, the way that we move through and navigate this world. You know, the world, as we know it, based on our last U.S. Census, is 51% female. It's diverse and it's inclusive, and that dynamic is changing. And so people are using their platforms to amplify their voices and bring to light the things that we've always known to be true. That as human beings, and especially as Indigenous people, we're resilient, we're strong, we're capable, and we're here to live and coexist among all of you. So, when we look at the American criminal justice system, and wealth and the culpability that outshapes those outcomes, many people charged with crimes really lack those resources to really, at the core of it, investigate cases and when you look at the dynamic of the racial disparities that exist in our systems, it's said that today there are nearly 10 million Americans, including millions of children, that have immediate family members in jail or prison. and there are over 4.5 million Americans that can't vote because of the past conviction. And each year, we lose $87 billion in gross domestic product due to massive incarcerations, you know? So when you think about it in perspectively, the U.S. has 5% of the world's population, but nearly 25% of us are incarcerated. That's pretty profound, you know? And when you look at those numbers and you aggregate those data, you know, so a majority of some of our people's lives and relatives, and I'm quite sure everybody in this room has a relative or somebody that they know that is in the system, the prison system, are incarcerated. You know, when you look at the spending of jails and prisons that reached over $87 billion in 2015, and now it is 2023, and I'm sure that has compounded since then. That at that point, there was 1,000% from that $7.4 billion spent since 1975. And I don't know about you, but I can think of a lot of better ways to spend our money and invest in social justice reform and heal our people than to incarcerate them and just not resolve the issue. It's just sort of one of those things where you're treating the symptom, but you're not treating the disease. And I think we really have to look at that as a collective people and find ways and we can move forward. You know, it was said in 1972 there were over 200,000 people incarcerated in the United States. And today, as I had said, that has grown to about $2.2 million. And interestingly enough, from 1980 until 2017, the number of women in jails and prisons grew by 750%. And so that's over a 250,000 women that are really incarcerated today. So, you know, although restorative justice is being sometimes polarized by Western approaches to criminal justice reform, particularly in response to mass incarcerations, it really has deep roots in Indigenous peacemaking, and you're going to hear from some Chief Justices today that have some phenomenal strategies as to how we can heal each other in the world and move forward in our criminal justice system and create resolution to this longstanding issue. You know, one of those particular things, you know, in my community and others, and I see my colleague Daniel King, who's he's a legislator for Oneida Nation, and his tribe is one of the inceptors in a very important Supreme Court case that's being heard before the Supreme Court case. And it's regarding the U.S. welfare system, you know, and why in the United States we have what's called the Indian Child Welfare Act, and why I bring that up as an inflection of restorative justice, especially when it works. You know, historically, tribal nations have sought systems that have harmonized Indigenous communities, and we look to ways to uplift, you know, Indigenous communities in our efforts. And so as we center ourselves and look to those practices through restorative justice, you know, it really requires a deeper examination of who we are as a people and looking to our futures as youth, because, you know, our elders are our wisdom keepers, but our youth are our wisdom bringers. And we have a responsibility to make sure we protect them. You know, Indigenous people think of themselves in a collective way, and we're very community-centric, you know. And so many, many years ago, through, you know, policymakers, technocrats, attorneys, Indian country decided that we knew best how to take care of our children and protect them, especially those that were most vulnerable in those systems. You know, and when we look at those respective Indigenous origins, you know, restorative justice has the potential to further integrate the Indian child welfare system. We consider it the gold star, and it's the gold standard of what it should be, because really what it is, it's that act was passed in Congress in 1978, and it's the Indian Child Welfare Act, or ICWA, and it was a legislative solution to resolve the problem that exists with since the colonization of Americas began, you know, and especially as it related to the theft of Indigenous children. And when you look at the elusive and challenging history that we have, and I know oftentimes it's it's not said for shock factor. It's intended to educate and to be reflective of who we are and how far we've come, and to remind each other as Indigenous people how strong and resilient we are, but to educate people why we are the way that we are and why we are who we are. And so when you look at those subsequent law systems and you put a place where it allows tribal nations through Indian child welfare to intervene in the name of providing those children with a chance to grow up within their cultures and their communities and be placed in tribal communities, I think if Brackeen versus Hallen is overturned, we're going to have substantial human cost to that. In the terms of those Native families and the facing of separation could really reach every corner of Indian country. I know that Secretary Hallen is bringing to light and telling our story about the boarding school experience and the genocidal practices that it inflected. And so, we're at a time of, healing, and it's truth and reconciliation. And so I would suggest, I also am a board member of the National Congress of American Indians, which is the oldest standing long policy institute in the United States that represents advocacy and policy for Native American Indians. And there is the Truth and Healing Report. I would suggest anybody that has time, it's something that you should read, because it really inflects historical context about policy, Native Americans, how laws that govern them inflect their ability to self-govern and uphold their sovereignty. One of the other things that, we do is we really take a lot of time and effort to make sure we engage our tribal communities and understand their vast needs, but also understand how we not only sustain, but we create healthy, thriving communities. So a lot of our focus becomes that of youth. An interesting project that myself and the other 10 tribes of Wisconsin are engaging in is in combative and in retroceding of the opioid crisis that's happening throughout Wisconsin and throughout America. We are building an adolescent wellness, culturally centric youth in treatment facility. It has been something in the making, over 25 years in the making. We have finally secured a site designation and the funding to build it, so we will be breaking ground this spring. I am so happy because we are going to teach the world how to heal, and we're going to teach our kids, about who they are, and so that they understand that they have a place in this world, and they can be seen and heard, and they can be valued for the same reasons that we value each other. And so it's my love project. It's something that I have worked on for a long time, and I'm so incredibly proud of that. But as I said, when you look at restorative justice and you look at wellness courts and you look at things that we can teach district attorneys and working in partnership with even engaging our legislature or how we effectuate law. And, I had the honor of speaking to Honorable Justice last night, Mary, and I, when we were talking about that, it's also an opportunity to enlist allies, because the students that are in here today, or those that are adjudicators or judicial people, or just people who are restorative justice crusaders, it's an opportunity for us to look at things differently, and we can change things. Laws can be amended. Change can happen, but we have to cycle break. We have to get out of the dynamics that we have been cast to and stop accepting things that have been given. I always say I will not accept things I cannot change. I will change the things I cannot accept. And so it requires all of us, and it requires us to amplify our voices. It requires civic engagement, and it requires representation. So when I talk about, justice in Indian country, it is it's complicated, it's multi-layered. We deal with systems that are compounded by local jurisdictions, state jurisdictions, federal jurisdictions, and federal and tribal jurisdictions, but at the end of the day, I'm still faithful that the will of the people is the law of the land. And I think that at the end of the day, I'm hopeful that we have such progressive young people that are going to change that dynamic. And, when we look at that, we look at the rise of rates of incarceration, and we look at the things that are happening around us. It's not just happening in Indigenous communities. It's happening everywhere. And when we start to destigmatize the idea of mental health or the state of it, and we start to address it and normalize it, that's when wonderful things happen. When we have those difficult and robust conversations, that is really when we can effectuate change. And when we look at that, and we look at the ontology of our ancestors and our nations and finding individual and community healing through that restorative justice, we need to make sure that there's alignment and allies in a cultural paradigm, that looks at our exercise of sovereignty and our self-determination, and making sure that we have a seat at the table as we elevate those things, and making sure, like the interceptor Oneida Nation cares enough to say it's not just for our children, it's for all children in an Indian country. It is a gold standard, and we're going to take it to the Supreme Court, and we're going to intercept. That's real, and that's meaningful to all of us. And so when we look at, half of the tribal reservations in the United States have unemployment rates that are higher than 50% and poverty rates that are more than 40%, and then you see the incarceration patterns of 44% higher than national average, and scores of Native men and women have been removed from their communities by criminal justice systems, and the adverse effects of prisoners and reentry, there is immediacy and urgency for all of us. It's everybody's job. And when we look at those statistics, we also have to look to opportunities. And that's really my hope today. My hope is not to just enlist you or shock you, or it's to educate you, but it's also to create allies and partners in this endeavor, because we're in it all together. We're all of the human race, and we all want to coexist among each other and live, And what we can do to take some of these lessons today and look at maximizing some of the challenges and the systematic barriers that we exist, we can look at the significant economic and social inequalities that are faced by generations of Native Americans, and examples of living with resilience among those communities, even affected by those mass incarcerations, substance abuse, and poverty. And we can also look at the traditions of resilience and manifest in Native American families and communities, and understand this process of resilience could unlock similar strategies for use by other populations in other parts of our countries and within our judicial system. We're going to look at that, and there are so many things to do. I mean, we were not recognized as citizens until 1924. And you saw our veterans walk in proudly. Native Americans have served at the highest per capita in service to our country since time immemorial. My tribe in particular have been a part of every conflict, and we're proud citizens of the United States. We serve, but we expect to be not only in service, but a part of the social landscape that exists as U.S. citizens of the United States. So as we look at that, and especially we look at some of the challenges about the erasure issue that exists among Native Americans. We have to do better. When we can be seen and heard and valued, we all do better, and we're all better for it. And when we look at, the resounding issue of, and I see some of our crusaders out in this audience today, about missing and murdered citizens, especially among tribal nations, and our limited capacity to intervene in those violence and adversity claims of the lives of our mothers, daughters, aunties, sisters, our brothers. I think people are surprised to hear that data, it used to be missing, murdered women, and it actually is our relatives, because it includes all of us, our male relatives as well. They're just as risk as our female relatives. And so as we look to that, and we build those tools for necessary to track that and to get proper data to aggregate that and to respond to that. You have to look at that, and we have to do better. My grandmother always said, when we know better, we do better, and that's absolutely the truth. And we have tribal nations here with us today, Chief Justice Jayne and others that are leading the way in those efforts, and they have a lot to partner and to teach and to support. And there's so much more I could talk about today, and in spearheading those jurisdictions and those expansions. But also, I can't emphasize enough the mental health and the dual diagnosis services that are needed so greatly for all of us, and the lack of that. Stabilizing is when, like I talked about earlier, having basic human rights being met every single day, and interestingly enough, when we look at the shaping of our Americas and the lives we experience every day on multiple Indian reservations across the United States, we look at healing the American Indian soul or the wound, and looking at terming the term soul wound to refers to the traumas that cannot heal in a generation but persist through the next, or it's known as intergenerational trauma. And so we look to that trauma as accumulative and concentrated in our communities, marked by adversity. And so, that's my stop. So, and I'm being mindful because you have so many people that you need to hear from. So I'll end with this. As we look to the long practices among people, natives in particular in this continent, we can learn and borrow so much from each other. In fact, at least around here, there is an active interest in benefiting from the wisdom of our neighbors, because that's who you all are. We could benefit from learning and adopting concepts of justice where they are practiced in parts for many years, even before European arrives. And today, the state of our Indian nations is strong because our ancestors worked hard to make it. And so if we work together, we can make their legacy, our tribal nations, everlasting. This is true strength and power. And of our teachings, of the collective strength of our tribal nations, our citizens, our allies, all of us, working together, standing united in one. Anishik.
Thank you so much, Shannon. You gave us a lot of challenges, and this group is up to it, so I'm confident. Our next speaker is JoAnn Jayne, who is the Chief Justice of the Navajo Supreme Court. The chief, I asked her if that was the right term, spent the day with us at Marquette Law School yesterday, met with students, both law students and undergrad students, met with the Indian law class. 50 students got to hear from her. She met with the dean. She met with some judges from Milwaukee County. We worked her really hard, but she had asked to do that, and we're hoping to have a new relationship between the Navajo courts and Marquette University Law School. The chief was born in Shiprock, New Mexico, and grew up in Tohatchi, New Mexico. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in agricultural industry from Arizona State University, a Master of Science degree in watershed management from the University of Arizona, and a Juris Doctorate degree from the University of Montana Law School. The chief served 4 consecutive terms in the Montana State House of Representatives, where she served on the Appropriations Committee. She was also elected as a state justice court judge in Lake County, Montana, and has served as a judge in Blackfeet Tribal Court, Confederated Salish, and Kootenai, she'll correct me if I get these wrong, Tribal Court, and the Crow Tribal Court. So we are just really excited about having the Chief Justice here and to give you an opportunity to learn from her. So, Chief.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. My name is JoAnn Jayne. I am Tkabahe. These are my clans. Tkabahe Shlen Kenya Ani Bashichin. Twitchini Dashiche Ara Tkabahe Dashanella. Yat E Bene Equit A Ya Sanan and Shlen. That means that I am of these clans, and that's the woman that I am. I'm very grateful to be here this morning. We have lovely, lovely snow. We have moisture. We have moisture that gives us a sign that life is good, that we need moisture. We need this moisture for all of us, not only here, but all over the world, especially in those arid conditions that are thirsting for water. just as we are today, thirsting for knowledge, thirsting for how can we help each other? How can we be of service to each other? This morning, I would like to give great thank you for asking me to be here to share with you the knowledge that we have with the Navajo Nation Judicial Branch, which houses the Navajo Nation Supreme Court. It also houses the district courts, a peacemaking program, and also probation and parole. Thank you very much. I would like to thank Dean Joseph Kearney for the huge welcome that I had yesterday. We will be building and have already started a relationship so that we can be of service to each other, and that we are grateful for that. I would also like to thank at this time Janine Geske, who with her committee invited me to be out here today, and I'm so grateful. I see that one of her photographs are up here, and that is very, 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 very beautiful. And she has served your community, and she has served your people well, and will continue to serve the people well. I also would like to acknowledge at this time Christine Wilsinski Vogel, who has been very instrumental in putting together a program that is before you today. And so she is also very instrumental in working with my staff so that we can have the opportunity to be here with you today. So yeah, thank you very much. I would also like to say yate to the tribal nations in Wisconsin. I am learning much about who you are, and we are all one people. So thank you very much for being here. Also, thank you very much for the prayer that we had today to start our meeting. Thank you also for the drum group that was here. Drum groups hitting our hearts, hitting our minds. Thank you very much for that. And also, thank you for the color guard that was here with us today. The color guard being those individuals that have served our country, and also those individuals that continue to forward the goodwill of all of our men and women and families that have served and continue to serve our nation. The military that we have right now, thank you for housing them, for inviting them as well. Appreciate all of that. And also, not last, but the Navajo Nation that I am a member of some are watching right now, families watching right now. So we greet them as well, that they are with us if they're not here in person, they are here on the World Wide Web at this time. So what I'm going to do at this time is talk, I better not forget the judges. The judges that we had, the judges that I met with yesterday, we had a great meeting. Thank you so much for that. Also the students at Marquette Law School and other areas, met with them yesterday as well. It was a pleasure to be here in the middle of the Marquette basketball game yesterday. And they won over St. John's, and I had to bring that up because I felt that I was right in the middle with all of you. I felt like it was my hometown even. So thank you for that. Also, I'd like to say hello and thank the speakers that are going to be here today. Surely we're going to all be visited with information and this gathering that we're going to have today. What I'm going to focus on in my presentation are a number of things, and I'm going to be quoting from an article that I wrote, and it's in the University of Arizona Journal of Appellate Practice and Process. It's volume 21, number 2, and it was published in the summer of 2021, and that was right in the midst of the COVID. And I wanted to go through that today, so when I'm quoting what I have in my talk today, it will be some of it will be directly from the article. And so the article does have the information, the notes that are in there, so that when I say something, it's referring, and it's been quoted also in the article, so that be aware of that if I'm quoting something, it has been vetted, and it has been quoted for purposes of quotes. So thank you very much. I'm going to go through 4 items. One is the history of that article. Second, the role of lawyers to serve the public trust. Third, the juror's duty of Geske. Geske is a Navajo word meaning kinship relations, and Hojonje meaning beauty, harmony, and balance. So I will cover that. And then I will also cover the Nebenatani. That means the people's leader. So when we have restorative justice, what does that mean? That means that we have 2 individuals or more. There is a meeting of the minds, and there is also a meeting of relations, a meeting of who are we as individuals, because we have one goal here, and one goal is to make someone and more people's lives better for it. So restorative justice comes in every form. We heard from the talk previously about all the relationships that we have, all of the efforts that have gone into working with yourselves, your communities, with the United States, with all of the other over 500 tribes in the United States. And there's also international relationships that have been formed, because we are all one people. We are still brothers and sisters. We have differences, but minimizing those differences is what is going to make us a better society, and that is what restorative justice is about. What I'm going to do at this time is talk about the history, a brief history of the Navajo Nation judicial system, and then I would lead into, what is the role of an attorney? Because we have these distinctive roles for everyone in regards to restorative justice, whether you're a government attorney, whether you're working independently, whether you are litigating, or if you're working on code revision, if you're working on any of those processes that go into what restorative justice is all about. After that, I will talk about what are the roles of the judges. What are the roles of the judges here? The judges that we have, the judges that can be of all walks of life, tribal judges, judges that work in government, judges that work for agencies. There are agency individuals that have that role in regards to making decisions for our people. Third, I'm going to talk about being a leader. How does being a leader affect restorative justice? What are we going to do as leaders, whatever role that could be? A leader could be in the home, the mom, the dad, the brother, sister, and it can be anyone, because everyone here, everyone out there, every single person out there is a leader in some point, in some fashion. And many times in society, we do not recognize that. We don't recognize that brother is a leader to a younger brother, an older sister, and so on. So thank you for allowing me to be here. And I will start, and I need these, so I will go with this. Now, what are the duties? What are the duties in mitigating division in law and society, right? It's great to say, okay, we have restorative justice, we can all come to the table, and we can all agree or disagree, or agree to disagree, and so on. But really, what happens when we cannot make that decision? So, what are the duties in mitigating the division in law and society? And I'm going to go with the Navajo portion of what I know. One cannot resolve disputes when in a confused state. Right? We cannot have that reservation and resolving disputes when we're in a confused state. Dene Benahazani, that means tribal Navajo law, teaches us that, and tradition teaches that human beings who have always been perfect need discipline and cannot realistically set the parameters for their own discipline. The concept of dissension was not heard of in ancient times of the Dene people, And that could be said with all nations, and that can be said with all societies. That the concept of dissension was not heard of in ancient times. There are no words for I am sorry in the Navajo language. Our culture is best known through interactions and experience, like everyone, interactions and experience. If a disagreement occurs, okay, what happens? It is a Navajo way to beg leave of the person who was offended, forgiving, asking for forgiveness. A strong condition exists. There is a custom to be followed. You approach and ask. The act of approach suggests humility and equality. The act of approach and request strengthens ties and relations. The cornerstone of this custom is the relationship that we would establish, the relationship that we would have. Disagreements do not create disobedience to the law under the system of Dene justice. What happens when there is dissension or disagreement with the law? What should happen when disagreement occurs? Has dissension bound the court's hands and prevented justice from being served? The heart of Dene justice operates on a much higher scale. It is connected to viewing the world holistically. The concept of dissension is foreign. And as human beings, we know that that can be very complex, that can be very hard in the relationships that we have. The role of attorneys is to serve the public trust. We are in a law school here. We have law schools all over the country. We have tribal advocates that practice before tribal courts, and others that work in our justice system. Again, the role of lawyers is to serve the public trust. There is their duty of using fundamental law through leadership. And I want to quote this. We are the image of our ancestors, and we are created in connection with all creation. Upon our creation, we are identified by one, our name, our Dene name, our clan, our language, our lifeway, our shadow, our footprints. Therefore, we were called the Holy Earth Surface people. Different thinking, planning, lifeways, language, beliefs, and laws appear among us. But the fundamental laws of the holy people remain unchanged. Unquote. The Navajo Nation courts have been called the premier indigenous judicial system in the world. The courts have been called the flagship of indigenous courts. Today, it is judicial independence that maintains the nation's sovereignty. American Indian courts look to the nation's courts as the helm of society and sovereignty. The Navajo Nation judicial branch is conscious of the need for independence and the obligation to protect and guard sovereignty for its nation, and likewise with all of the Indian nations in the United States and elsewhere. The result of this independence is that the courts are capable of conducting duties, of restoring harmony, part of restorative justice, providing teachings, and then also upholding the sovereignty of the nations. The judicial branch of the Navajo Nation has a sacred duty and responsibility to uphold the values and principles of these teachings that I just spoke of. 64 years ago, the Navajo Nation's court celebrated its independent judiciary. And let me give you a brief synopsis of where we came from. The Bureau of Indian Affairs under the United States Department of the Interior created the Navajo Courts of Indian Offenses, known as the CFR courts. And it brought Anglo courts to the nation beginning in 1892. It was the independence of the first Navajo judges and in those CF courts that preserved the Neck culture and traditions. In the 1950s, a proposal was introduced in the state of Arizona to take over the nation's courts using the then newly enacted Federal Public Law 280. In response, the Navajo Nation Tribal Court, or Council, approved a resolution establishing the Navajo Courts of Indian Offenses and declared that the existing courts would be the Navajo tribes' court system. The resolution became effective April 1st, 1959, so that is a long time ago. And so establishing its own court system is a sign of building its sovereignty for the nation. What are the roles of the lawyer at this time? We are in a building that teaches justice, it teaches procedure, it teaches all of the tenets that one would need to have. Does that end here? No, it doesn't. So when you get out of law school, you're going to be put in that situation as to what is restorative justice. Because restorative justice exists now, and restorative justice exists when you walk out the door, or at least it should. So what is that role of an attorney in regards to restorative justice? On the Navajo Nation Supreme Court has regulatory authority on the regulation of practice within the Navajo Nation. So it's the Navajo Supreme Court that does that. It is a privilege and not a right to practice law before the Navajo Nation courts. Membership in the Navajo Nation court system for entry of practice on the law is based on entrance and an entrance test as a Navajo Nation bar examination to be able to practice on the Navajo Nation. Here is a responsibility of anyone that is going to practice on Navajo in courts or in administrative agency. There is a special relationship and responsibility to ensure the integrity of the Navajo legal system. So, different from other jurisdictions, the Navajo Supreme Court recognizes that working for the people is a leader, that you're a leader before you are an attorney. But isn't that one of the same? And, that's subject to how you view the system and how you view the area that you're in. And I want to quote this. As representative of the people, which is the Navajo people, a leader for the people and also for those who work with you, you must advise and teach them of the laws of the Dene, or the Navajo. Even though they might not agree with the law, therefore, to be a leader and lawyer for the people, one must use and respect the laws of all of the people. For example, government attorneys have a fiduciary duty not to obstruct, nor interfere, nor influence the functions of the Navajo Nation court system. This keeps a lot of the tenets of restorative justice in check. Sometimes we think about two individuals coming and talking things out and having some type of resolution. And so what is taught is that you look at yourself from the respect of a leader and what are your responsibilities going into restorative justice. So dissension may develop when counselors of the law disagree with the law, rightfully so. Individuals represented by lawyers may disagree with the law as created by legislatures. However, when lawyers are sworn in to uphold the standards required of lawyers, professional responsibilities also are created. Rules of professional responsibilities, if you are a judge, you know, like what are the canons of judges and so forth. So those come into play. And in 1989, the Navajo Nation courts recognized that lawyers owe a duty to uphold the integrity and honor of their profession. The Supreme Court, which I am part of at this time, have instructed lawyers to dedicate themselves to public service, to inspire confidence, to maintain respect and enhance public and client trust. The very tenets of those processes that you would use for restorative justice. Being able to trust, being able to defend, and being able to rely on someone who is going to go into a restorative justice system. Not only do individuals that practice before the Navajo Nation have to have those tenets, but they also have to know the Diné culture and tradition in order to serve the public. And there are places, individuals, material, educational resources that you can get so that you can learn Diné culture and Diné tradition and so on, because it is believed that with those in mind, with that knowledge, that you can become, and you are a leader as well. What I will do now is jump to jurists, judges. What do we have? What is our responsibilities? We have responsibilities of codes, of canons, of how we are going to proceed with the public, how we are to uphold the trust of the people that come before us, to uphold the passion, to uphold the integrity, the truthfulness of those that appear before our court system. As I stated earlier, that's a relationship. Contemplates one's unique, reciprocal relationship to the community and the universe. It promotes respect, solidarity, compassion, and cooperation so that people may live in hojonche, or in harmony, that we can live in this harmonious state. It fosters human relations through friendship, through fairness, mutual respect. It requires being fully informed and is given the opportunity to speak. Now, isn't that one of those that, as jurists, sometimes we are given instructions to instruct those before the court? And so how often do we let the others speak? How often do we let those that are before us to speak and give them that time? Through talking things out under the principle of courts assist in bringing litigants and to hojo. Is a high standard which the people hold our leadership, our jurists, our attorneys, in their exercise of power, because it is that authority that we have to make a difference. I have said that the judicial branch, the Navajo Nation judicial branch, as in other districts and other states, is that the judicial branch is the only branch that can take someone's freedom away with a decision by a judge. We can sentence someone to incarceration, much like or unlike the executive branch or the legislative branch. It is the judicial branch is the one that has that sacred responsibility, and therefore it is incumbent upon the judicial branch that we do follow the canons of being an attorney, the professional responsibilities that we have, the canons and following the canons of judicial interpretation, judicial education, and being aware and cognizant of that authority, that sacred authority that we have to take somebody's freedom away, whether it's short or long period. And so part of restorative justice is just that, looking at who is before us, looking at society as a whole, looking at whether or not someone is someone's, well, everyone is someone's brother or sister, parent, uncle, a brother, everyone. And I will get to another part of this. The Navajo Nation, culturally, we do not throw people away. Everyone is worth something. Every soul is worth living, every soul. We are not perfect. We're not perfect as humans. But we are capable of having that relationship, creating that relationship, giving another person that opportunity to speak to us. Very little, that's fine. So the role of the judges are very important. Maintaining that harmonious relationship and building a harmonious plan if we can. Certainly we know as judges, as jurors, that not everyone may, because of the rules that we have, because of the different legislative statutes and so forth, we're not going to solve everyone's problems as we would. We're not a perfect society. However, we can be perfect in trying. We can be perfect in trying to do that. In Navajo teaching, individuals have the responsibility to respect others. You know, we do have a responsibility. I mean, how often do we think about what is my responsibilities to another individual? To illustrate Navajo teaching, individuals have the responsibility to respect others. In a Navajo Nation Supreme Court case, it's called Kisola versus Anderson versus Security Agency. In that case, the Navajo Nation Supreme Court stated this, quote, "Words are not to be used to offend or intimidate. Words are sacred and never frivolous in Navajo thinking." So it's thinking that we've got to really be careful in our communications, not just for judges, for attorneys, but just as individuals in this society. In heated family discussion or community meetings, the elders often say, "Hajongo, hajongo, sha'alchine," which means, "My children, patience and respect are due." So, now going on to what is a leader and how is a leader going to be recognized? How is a leader recognized? What is a leader? Individuals, as stated earlier, individuals are leaders. Everyone in this building is a leader, everyone, in one form or another. We all have varying skills, God-given gifts to be able to live here on this earth so that we can help each other. And that we have a destiny to impart from us to the future generations how they're going to live so that we can give them a life that they can enjoy as well. So, Dene Justice contemplates conduct becoming a leader. A leader does not ever lay down the trust and the laws of the people he or she serves. Never lay down that trust, it says. And don't lay down the laws of the people. In view of that, a Natani, or a leader, who holds the office of a judge with the substantial powers of that office entrusted to him or her by the people, never surrenders the trust and the laws in the eyes of the people. Not anis or leaders are required to be conscious of their authority to find sacred solutions. Leaders do not ever lay down the people's trust and the laws because a leader is taught that they must find the solution, for it is always available. Restorative justice, there's always a solution available somehow, some way. As demonstrated in the design of the Navajo sacred wedding basket, a leader, through adherence to the laws, the analysis of the stories of the Diné journey, and a positive approach will find solutions around, through, or over that which confronts the people. And here's another quote I want to give to you. In our Navajo thinking, great responsibilities of public service are placed on a Nat'ani, and that's a leader, greater than may be commonly understood in other jurisdictions. Those who wish to serve must understand that his or her own need to self-assess his or her own qualifications under the laws, his or her own abilities to serve, and the great needs of the public that in numerous cases lack the resources to watch over the actions of the Nat'anis that they select. Navajo reasoning dictates transparency as well. And I'll give you an example. People enter a Hawan. Everybody knows the Hawan is the home. It's a round home of the Navajo and other indigenous people and people in general. People enter the Hawan through the east door. That's a tradition that we have. They come in on the east side. Although a Nat'ani enters a Hawan like a people he or she serves, the standard of conduct of a Nat'ani is higher and stricter. The leadership has a higher and stricter conduct. The Nat'ani indeed is expected to be honest, faithful, and truthful in dealing with his or her people. Thus, a Nat'ani betrays the trust of the people when he or she chooses to sneak around the Hawan in search of a non-existent side door in an effort to be less than open and honest. A Nat'ani is greatly respected by the people. However, a Nat'ani can be relieved of authority if he or she betrays the public trust that has been placed in him or her. The relevance of this teaching is that it is going to have to take one's individual hard work and sacrifices to learn the necessary skills to sustain a prosperous life for an entire community. The principle of Geske contemplates one's unique, reciprocal relationships to the community and the universe. It promotes respect, solidarity, compassion, and cooperation so that we may live in hajon, or in harmony. Geske stresses the duties and obligations of individuals relative to their community. So, brothers and sisters, as we are, restorative justice is just that. What is our relationship to each other? What is the opportunity that we can give to each other so that we can have a dialogue? We may not all agree, but again, we can be perfect in trying. We can be perfect in getting to that point where we can live to the best of our abilities, because what is the goal of restorative justice? Happiness. Happiness is what we strive for. Happiness is what we have as individuals. It is a gift given to us. It is a gift that we have a life, and that it is incumbent that we help each other in order to live in this society. I'll go on that. Thank you.
All right, we're going to begin our first panel of the day. We have a number of panels with wonderful speakers representing different places and different programs. I'm first going to introduce, I don't know where Mark is.
You're right behind us.
Oh, there he is. Okay, there he is. Mark
Sometimes elusive.
Mark Denning, who you've had an opportunity of hearing this morning. He is an enrolled tribal member of the United Nation of Wisconsin. He's been involved in public education programming for over 40 years. So he is an elder, right? That makes you an elder?
He's a baby elder.
Baby elder.
Baby elder.
Baby elder, okay. He studied at Marquette and then became an adjunct lecturer at a university in Milwaukee, speaking for and about Native issues. Mark Denning is committed to helping communities and people in need, especially in education. His passion is helping teachers, students, and businesses understand and appreciate Native American culture from a historical and contemporary point of view to create greater understanding, teamwork, and communication. I'm going to introduce Jason right away so that after Mark is finished, that Jason can speak. Jason Dropik, is that I say it right?
That is right.
Okay. Is a member of the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Ojibwe. He serves as the head of school at the Indian Community School. Some of you know that. It is one of our schools that used to be close to Marquette and now is way in the south, working with families, teachers, students, staff, and community members to provide the best possible learning experiences for everyone. Jason takes great pride in the ICS mission and commitment to life each day at the school, fostering meaningful relationships within the school, in the community, and with other Native organizations. As a leader of an intertribal school, he continually seeks out opportunities to learn about all our nations. He obtained his BA degrees in early and intermediate education from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and a master's degree in administrative leadership from Concordia University. So would you welcome both of them before their talks? Thank you. And Mark, if you want to begin.
Bonjour, everybody. Mark Denning, and you heard a little bit about who I am. And what I wanted to say is just, I'm not being impolite to our panelists, or just our Grand Chief. I'm a member of the Three Fires Medewan Lodge, one of the oldest religions in Wisconsin. And our Grand Chief, the late Eddie Benton Bene Siabun, was one of my main teachers. And I know what he would say about this place, because I've been to a few universities with him, traveled with him, learned from him. And he would say that this is not an indigenous place of learning, this room, because the room is such that all the focus is on the speaker. It was up to him and the parents that helped create the Indian Community School. There would be windows all around us so the students could imagine and see our great world. We would be in a position where we could see each other and be responsible to each other. And so, in being in this non-indigenous place of learning, now we're here, and I'm learning. And I'm learning by looking at the faces on the walls of who they are, and the two of us that are in front of you. And my hope is that to uplift and educate. Thank you.
So do you want to go ahead, Mark?
So as you look at the picture behind me, that kind of came to me when I was invited to speak here. The one person that you see is my aunt. It's 1975 with the Novitiate Brothers. Remember, students, and I'm going to address the students here in law when it comes to American Indian law, there was a policy of termination. And the United States government terminated the Menominee Nation. And in 1961, that came to a fuller fruition. Our reservation, the place where I was born, I'm an Oneida tribal member, descended from 6 different tribes, spiraled into poverty, alcoholism, self-medicating, being unemployed, every imaginable social ill, people dropping out, hopelessness came and descended over us. And so in 1975, there were young Menominee people, like the students in this room, that said they had had enough. And my aunt was one of them, Crystal Caldwell. And what you see in that picture behind her are soldiers. And when I think of restorative justice, my question in my own mind is, restore to what? What do you do when justice has hardly ever been done in our communities, or never done since 1492? And human trafficking began with that first interaction. What is it that we are restored to then? And so my aunt had this kind of question. And then the picture that you see her there with the soldiers behind her, the short story of that is there were men inside the novitiate. That's the Alexian Brothers Novitiate, 1975, January 1st. They had taken that over because there was an understanding that if there was an abandoned property near our reservation, that if we took it, if we seized it, if we occupied it, it would become ours. And our Menominee Warrior Society wanted to have a place of health. That is particularly important to me because if somebody got sick or had a heart attack, you were 40, 45 minutes away from the Shawano Hospital. And the only way to get there was through somebody else's car or running to some neighbor's house and asking for help. This is the community I was born in, and grandparents that were raising me. And this was one of my little mothers. So in 1975, what's the story behind that picture is that I had a cousin who was about 14, Darren. And the guys in the novitiate were hungry. They were cold. They had taken it over in the interests of our people. So we needed to get them food. So one of my uncles was talking to one of my cousins, Darren Hapatas. That last name is that forever lightning. Forever lightning. And one of the Menominee warriors asked him and said, we need you to go out by those military, pick one of them and hit them as hard as you can, and then run like heck. Because when that happens, they think like individuals. They're gonna chase you. And when they chase you, that means we can get our supplies in. And so Darren, being Darren, walks up to a soldier and blasts him right in the face as big as a 14-year-old can do and starts running. Well, and to our veterans here, you're gonna know this part of the story, restorative justice. The soldiers picked their guns up, started firing. Straight line. Not a single bullet hit him. Not a single bullet hit him. And when they were firing, this is when my aunt grabbed an American flag, wrapped it around her, and everybody paid attention to her. And that was a moment where she said, I'm putting this flag around my shoulders because we're in trouble. And we need help. And that upside down flag means it. And when all those soldiers saw that upside down flag, they stopped firing at Darren, and they paid attention to him. And this is the part of restorative justice to our veterans. Every one of you knows how to put together a gun. I don't care what profession you're in, and you know how to shoot. And if you got a straight line shot at a kid who's 15, 20 yards away, you're gonna make it. Something tells me that all of those soldiers looking to do their duty saw a 14-year-old kid, knew our story, and never hit him with a single bullet. So this idea of restorative justice happened in a single moment. And so when I was asked to be here, that's why her image is there. My comments are dedicated to her. On the other side of her is her niece, Isabel. Isabel also has an upside down flag. And this happened during the No Idle movement she too took a flag, like her aunt, because she said our community's in trouble. My aunt was very proud of her. This amazing girl. And so, what does restorative justice look like? Victims are the focus. The harm that occurred, right, is the second focus. And the focus on how to go about repairing that harm. But what's the model? What was it before harm was done in those years in 1492? And that's why I'm kind of blowing up this room, and each of you is going to have homework when we're done. And here's your homework. Outside of this building, Marquette University spent a lot of money for landscaping. And in that landscaping against the building are small stones, river stones. I'd like each and every one of you to get one of those stones when we have a break. And you're going to be placing them in our Indigenous classroom that's to my left. When you have a moment, this was our original classroom. And I'm going to talk about how restorative justice works for us. And if you can't see it, what you have outlined in sand is what our Medewan Lodge looks like. And when someone comes looking for justice, what happens? I'll end my short remarks in two ways. One is, as we sit in this room, the dominant culture wants to think of us as individuals, the me. When we write, the we is a little w, the I is capitalized. Charles Dickens, right? Charity begins at home. Justice begins, right? Charity begins at home, justice begins next door. It's quite a quote. He's a satirical writer. I'll talk more of that. But I bring that up because of this. There's work to be done, and we're going to do it. And our classroom needs to be this classroom because it was suggested earlier. When we talk about restorative justice as we sit here, Jason and I, we are sons of the earth and sons of the water. And without their inclusion in restorative justice, there can be no justice.
Chimigwich. First and foremost, just want to apologize for speaking in front of my elders. It is within our customs and the ways in which I have been taught to always to defer to my elders. So though Mark's a little bit younger than me, I still give him that honor. You're welcome. You're welcome for that. I look younger than I am. But I know that I'm still learning, and so I appreciate every opportunity to continue to gather with our elders, those wisdom keepers that continue to fight for and provide us opportunity. Thinking about restorative justice, I'll first start with Buju, Babami Benes Indigenous, Minawaki and Dunjiba, Migizi and Dudem, Anishinaabe and Dao. My name is Babami Benes, Thunderbird traveling about. Traveled back last night, so that was really great. Eagle Clan. Born and raised in and around Milwaukee, Wisconsin my entire life, and so even called Marquette a brief home as my first year of college was at Marquette. No offense, but your education degree costs a little more than UWM, so I did transfer when I switched majors from pre-med to education. And so thankful for my time here and the opportunity to come gather with you. I often tell people that, raise your hand if you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump. Yeah, people familiar with that story, right? So interesting character. I'm pretty much the Native American Forrest Gump. So if you are wondering, I try to put myself by really, really strong, intelligent people, and I have amazing opportunities through no real contribution of my own, but really some fortunate luck and relationships that I build. I do serve as the school administrator at the Indian Community School. Very thankful for that opportunity because the Indian Community School gave me purpose, and it helped me find a path when I was lost. When I grew up as an urban American Indian, not really knowing where I fit in, through a teenage mother who fought, big shout out to all of our women, International Day of the Women 2 days ago, and thinking if you haven't yet thanked the women in your lives for all that they have done and all that they continue to do, please find time to do that. I'm grateful forever for the women in my life that continue to inspire me to be a better person. But my mom, through no fault of her own, wasn't treated great. She didn't have justice. She was called every name that you can imagine as a Native American woman in the city of Milwaukee, in public high schools, in those conditions and treatment of it. And through no fault of her own, tried to teach me to blend in. You're gonna have an easier life. You'll have a better life if you assimilate, essentially. She didn't have that word at that time, but it was, I'm gonna protect you from the ills of this society and the way that you are gonna be treated based on the color of your skin and the experience that you've had and our ancestors have had. And so that was an interesting journey, and the Indian Community School gave me the opportunity to seek and to find more about who I am as an Anishinaabe, as a Native man trying to do my very best to improve conditions for everyone and everything around me. I fall short on that every single day, but I try that perfect. I love that idea of seeking that perfect attempt every day. And so that's a great opportunity that each of us have. And so two things, just as I start with that in my travels with the Indian Community School, and really through them and the opportunities that they've provided, I get the opportunity to seek justice and to learn from other elders and community members. Serve on the National Indian Education Association Board of Directors. Just completed a 2-year term as their president this past October. Great opportunity to continue to learn, but also unfortunate in the fact that I am then forced to be able to confront and to see the continued injustices that exist within our tribal communities. Yeah. That recognition of sovereignty, Native American groups being named in the Constitution 3 different times, only group to be named in that way, is profound because not many people know it. And the government definitely doesn't enact it. And so how do we continue to seek and inspire our youth to fight for that our ancestors have fought for a really long time? How do we continue to create spaces where it's okay to talk about the past, it's okay to talk about the injustices, but not just to talk about them as, well, that happened back then, or that's not now. It is now. It continues to happen today. And it was an exact example of that injustice around what's happening to our tribal people in this day and age, continuing to this very moment. So how do we stand up for it? And we need partnerships. We need collaborative groups. We need groups like this and conferences like this to come together to say enough's enough, and it's not okay. We're not going to do that to any people, including those people that have been here for as long as this space has been. And so as we come together and we talk about those different areas, two things before I end my short, we both talk a lot. So we'll see if you guys might not get lunch till dinner time, but we'll do our best. And so, but ultimately that idea of restoring, just thinking about the definitions, restoring, to bring back to a former condition, place, or position. But Mark's exactly right, bring it back to what? What are you seeking to bring it back to, and for who? And that justice, that quality of fair and reasonable. And when we think about the lasting impact on unmet treaty obligations, land stealing, the ripping away of families from their family members, there is a lot that is unjust and unfair in those situations, and continues to be something that we advocate for. So my speaking will be a lot about those different experiences that we've had in communities. I don't speak for all tribal people, not even for my entire tribe or any community, other than the experiences that I've been fortunate to be able to have being amongst amazing leaders and warriors throughout that journey. And from a school context, how do we live that in our schools, which is really, starting at that home, our parents being those first teachers. Every single one of us are not only leaders, but every single one of us are also teachers. And what are we teaching? And how do we teach that within every community that we have the opportunity to be present in? So, miigwech for the opportunity to be here. Thank you so much. We'll be bouncing back and forth quite a bit.
So Mark, would you talk a little bit about, because I see that you worked with public schools, you've worked with kids, both in terms of teaching Native American culture, but also trying to build understanding and teamwork. Could you give us some examples or some stories about your experiences and what you've encountered?
After 40 years, I really don't know where to begin, but I'll begin here at Marquette University. When I started here in 1979, we were all gathered in an auditorium, and we were told, look to your left, look to your right, and that person won't be here. And then we were told everything will be graded on a scale where you're compared with each other, right? So I remember 100 questions, filling out 100 fill in the blanks, getting 84, getting a D. And the professor saying, He's serious? Why are you here? And that was my first conversation is, do I really even belong here? Do I really? So when it comes to education, that was one of my challenges to address within myself is I had never run into people stealing your notebook. I had never run into people buying books out of the bookstore so you couldn't get them. I didn't remember seeing people checking libraries out of libraries so you couldn't see them. That's what it was to be here. So restorative justice, it looks a lot better. But the one thing I did learn in class, and you weren't far behind me, you were just ahead of me, I'm looking at other students that were here. The big thing for us was a Turner thesis. And a Turner thesis came out of UW. Any Badgers in the room? The university? I'm sorry. So the Turner thesis came out of the UW, and it was more of a sophisticated argument about manifest destiny. And manifest destiny is this idea that when people come into an area, they are destined by God to dominate, and whatever happens, they're kind of covered by the God card. And so the Turner thesis was a sophisticated effort to look at that in Wisconsin agriculture, mining, and shipping activities. And that's what we were exposed to in our Western civilization class. The Turner thesis is amazing. So how do we justify that? How I justified that is continuing to go to school here. That was my way of doing it. And then trying to uplift other people that went to school here as other people did for me. So a more modern example of what restorative justice might look like for our classrooms and for our young people is understanding that classrooms don't have to exist as they do today. Our classrooms can look like the one behind me. This is on relief, is an image of our Grand Medicine Lodge. When people, other lodges are done differently. And so our teachers sit in different places. The students sit in different places, our elders sit in different places, and when there's disharmony or disunion, dissension, right, difference, there's a way that we address it. And so at Indian community schools, some of the models that you're working with, they came from a guy by the name of Lee Wig Ninham. And he worked with the great law, understood the words that come before all others, meaning, when we start, do we start with difference, or do we start with the words of things that we have in common? How do we settle disruptions? Because certainly the Indian Community School is a far different place than it used to be. The Indian Community School's catalyst for its major change in the modern era came after a takeover. And one of those people who helped do that is sitting in the room in the back row. And that's where usually theater leaders do sit. They're sitting in the back, and they're watching us. And they're finding out who they can work with. And they don't have to say a single thing. It's an awesome piece, being from this community and knowing how it works.
Jason, you want to tell us a little bit more specifically about the Indian school that you work with and how you think it's different maybe than other schools and what it is that how you continue the culture and processes for the students.
Sure, and before we do that, just real quick about what does school look like for Indigenous students, Native students who aren't in our school, because that's the schools that I grew up in and started off with. Went to private parochial school at the beginning of my educational career. Only person who was not of a white complexion within the classroom. Had one paragraph in our textbooks in 4th grade typically about Native American studies, and it was all past tense about this is what used to exist. So my initial teachings on Native American cultures and my ancestry, my belong is that it's in the past and that it's gone. And so that is pretty commonplace and unfortunately still to this day. We did a recent site visit of a school as we were looking at furniture, and we still seen images in their library center with teachers printing out Pilgrims and Indians in November. And this is in a community, affluent community nearby. Won't put them out yet today, but did reach out to their administrator after that visit, just talking about we can do better than that. So the existence for our Native students is one of non-acceptance, non-even presence. devaluing that experience and that perspective and that their existence. And so that's true of our students and Native students across the country. 93% of Native students go to public schools. And the Indian Community School is founded on three mothers saying enough's enough. We're taking them out of the public schools. They're not going to be exposed to this. We're going to teach them. We're going to restore their identity. We're going to restore justice for them through process of keeping them safe and providing them a space where they're loved and supported, no matter what tribe they come from, no matter what language they speak, no matter how they look, no matter how they present to the world. And so that's the Indian Community School. That's the founding mothers. And that's the path that has been set before I got there. But part of what it is now today is that we want students to acknowledge and to understand who they are. And that's changing. And that continues to change and evolve. But whoever you are, wherever you are from, you are loved. You are valued. You are important. We have a student, Amelia will hate it because I'm going to introduce her, but Amelia right in the middle is one of our 8th grade students. Amelia can give a good pageant wave. Got a nice little princess wave. Yep. And Amelia will tell you, you can pull her off to the side and she'll ask, have you ever heard anyone say that they love you at school, but you're adults? And if she says no, I'm going to be mad at her because that's not truthful. But that means that then I need to say it more often, but they have heard it and they do hear it because we do love them. We care for them no matter how the society will treat them, no matter what that is. And it's founded on those gifts from the Creator, sacred gifts of love, wisdom, humility, bravery, respect, honesty, and truth. Those gifts that we teach and do our best to teach every day, fall short on that perfection every day as well, but try to do our best so that they see themselves as not individuals, but very much a part of a whole. And that entire society and that group around them depends on them. They are so essential to that continued growth, that continue to give back and to protect all of creation, not just people, not just their families, but everything that's around them is what ICS stands for and what we try to do. And we fall short on occasion as well too. And we're still working on how do we even not judge ourselves. But even within our own school community and within our own tribal nations, there is still hurt. There's still trauma that has been passed on. Those practices of termination were gifted to our communities. Unfortunately, we have not gotten rid of all of those unfortunate gifts. And so when we think about how do we continue to help support one another, we try to make sure there's 4 native languages that are taught at our school. And that's from 4-year-old kindergarten through 8th grade. Students have those 4 languages to choose from to be able to be a part of. It doesn't cover all of our over 30 different tribal nations that are represented at our school. It's a start. But it's a really big component and portion of our school community so that you can hear the languages of your ancestors. Because in that language is our culture. And when it was removed from us in boarding schools and in other ways where we couldn't practice our traditions, where we couldn't speak our languages, where we couldn't gather together in ceremony and song, we have to demand that back. And then we have to share it with others. And it's on our responsibility to create those experiences and opportunities for our students so that they can continue that legacy as well. And then cultural practices, continuing to gather together, to have lodges outside of our buildings by where the students eat lunch so they can see those spaces. We have to use them a little bit more, that we're working on yet too, because they're there, but they're not utilized as much as they should be. But Mother Earth is our classroom. Mother Earth is our teacher. And so getting kids outside, getting them to say that you can learn everywhere and anywhere that you are, and you have to seek those opportunities is also what we aspire to do each and every day. So one of the big teachings at our school is really this idea that everyone's creation story is valid. And our students hear that so that their perspective, their teachings, their backgrounds, they don't determine the trajectory that they're going. Their work, their commitment towards continuing to grow, their relationships that build with everyone, that determines where they're going to go. And they're going to continue to not wait to be invited to those tables, but they're going to demand a seat at them. And that came a lot through just different work that our elders had done in our community, the leaders that came before to create the space that we have. They demanded something better for their kids. And quite honestly, I mean, if you ever visit the Indian Community School, people will be amazed and often talk about the building. And the building is beautiful, by far as beautiful as any space can possibly be. And we might have some, yeah, keep going. It is an amazing building and space and grounds, over 180 acres for our students to go and explore and to be a part of. The windows that are from floor to ceiling, the circular spaces that gather together so that everyone can see each other and can be a part of that. But that's that's great and that's beautiful, but that's not what makes ICS beautiful. It is the students, it's Amelia and her classmates, it's alumni that are in the space as well that are yep, that's you, that are coming in, yep, for sure. That, yeah, absolutely, that continue to come back and to give back. And so we have currently 3 alumni from the Indian Community School that came back to be language and culture apprentices. That's, they're working at our school now after being at our school. That is sustaining, that's restoring justice for our community.
I would like each of you, and you can weave it into however you want to describe it, in terms of, you know, the culture and raising and making sure the children feel loved. What have you seen in terms of when there is conflict, when there is disruption, when there is truancy, when you have those issues that the kids have, how is it that you approach it?
You want me to start? Oh, man, throw cell phones against the wall? I wish I could do that without getting in trouble with some parents. But, you know, those are expensive phones that they give their kids on occasion. So that still happens, and there's many different ways that we've explored and looked at that. I'll just speak from my perspective first, and then we can talk about a couple of things, and Mark can definitely share some things that have been happening within communities and are somewhat a part of our community at times. But the very first time is to really just talk about it and to build relationships. And so how do you do that? And how do you continue to see all those diverse perspectives, because they're important? And I'll do it by example. I was in D.C. this week for NIEA for their Hill Week to legislate on really trying to improve conditions for all Native students, which I'm very fortunate to be able to be in a space where it is supported and valued and encouraged and everything that we need. But I had a parent who decided to send off a message to the teacher saying that she was done with this effing stuff, and so I'll keep it censored a little bit, being that, you know, many people might be watching online. I don't want to get censored or any sort of fines. So my initial response, the health room, and this was in regards to a student with a potential lactose issue, things of that sort, and so it was just around health, but she was not happy, and she made sure that the teacher in the health room knew that she was not happy. So my first response is, why are you cussing at our staff? You can cuss at me, you don't need to be cussing at our teachers, you don't need to be cussing at our health room. I signed up for that, they did not. So that's my initial response, initial thought. I did not send that, because Creator has given me pause now. I didn't always have pause. My board has given me a lot of opportunities to pause, and so I get a lot of practice on occasion. They'll get me on that later. But so I was able to pause and just really, well, where is this coming from? And so within restorative practices within the school and within our families, it's trying to seek to understand rather than to be understood. Some of you might know that reference as well. And so I had texted her and said, can you please call me? I hear you're frustrated. And so that was my response to her at first, and she did. She called me on my cell phone. As I was in D.C., we were able to have a really nice conversation, no cuss words exchanged at all. And she was upset because we had Domino's Pizza. That's a big deal for elementary kids. Her son's 5. And so we had Domino's Pizza as part of it. He didn't have it because on some form he had a rough reaction to some cheese, and so they thought that there was an allergy. It was noted on some form, but it was misnoted for whatever reason. He's not allergic to cheese, not allergic to dairy. Had a bad reaction once because he had too much cheese or too much dairy. And so we had kept pizza from her son. So she is advocating for her child who loves pizza, in particular Domino's Pizza. So try to understand perspectives before we make judgments is really the very first part of what we try to do to the best of our ability. I'm not going to take one side of a story. I'm not going to just automatically go into the consequences, which is what can happen. Removal of freedom before we even know what has happened is something that does happen. We don't want our students to experience that. So try to have a conversation with them. What is going on? What are those perspectives with our families? What are the different perspectives? Then how do we make this right? How do we move forward together? And so I apologized, said, sorry that he missed out on Domino's. Good news, we're going to have it again. It will happen, and I will make sure that the forms are updated so that that doesn't happen again. If you're frustrated, you now have my cell phone number. Please just text me instead of, cussing at staff. She chuckled a little bit, and hopefully she doesn't. If I was a betting man, I'm not sure that won't happen again. But the staff knows that they're supported and that I'll reach out. The family knows that we care about their kids and we're going to do our best. And so we come together to try to help one another out. So that's an example of one of the ways.
Can you teach the rest of the world that pause?
No,
that
yeah.
pause?
Not anymore.
Mark.
I'm going to kind of, one is a thank you, because I don't want us to run out of time without saying it, for the model of restorative justice. It's something we're familiar with as Indigenous people, and it's had a worldwide effect. Meaning, remember South Africa when it was dealing with apartheid, right? Restorative justice was a part of informing that process. Certainly that was happening in 1995. And then in Canada, that started with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Murray Sinclair, Chief Justice Murray Sinclair was one of my son's really good friends, sits in our Three Fires Lodge. And what that was using a truth and reconciliation process to address what had happened to Native American kids in boarding schools. Now, the truth and reconciliation process, in its process from a social scale of large scale, had just what you're seeing, the result of just what you're seeing on the screen. As professors and educators were looking at the truth and reconciliation, as that work was happening where a hearing body would go to each Native place and hear the stories of residential school survivors. Remember, we are in a Catholic institution. 70% of the institutions in Canada, boarding schools, were Catholic. All right? So there was this responsibility that a lot of places, Catholic Church, were holding some of the sites for some of these meetings and addressing what was being said. The point is this: the social response of Canada was these kinds of acknowledgements, meaning what can we do as a society? So what we do with these land and water acknowledgements or land acknowledgements is these are read before gatherings. This is a direct result of restorative justice. Where can it start there? But it has to be more. It has to be more. Because remember that when we're looking at justice, we look at it from different lenses. And one is the lens of the individual, individualism in the United States, right? So I'm just going to go back to my really good friend, this guy, right? Charles Dickens. I mean, think about what that is. That's rugged individualism at work, right? That certainly is. But what about the we? What about the we? Like going to the responsible thinking room at the Indian Community School. Now, he's laughing about that. Got some board members up there laughing about it. Well, where does that come from? What's a responsible thinking room? And why would we send a head of schools, Mr. Dropick, to the responsible thinking room? It's because a board member might say, you know, you did something wrong, but can you tell me about what happened there? And maybe you say, this is what I think happened. And then you kind of stay at that with some sort, not an inquisition, but saying, please articulate for me what happened. And then why did it happen? So what we're doing is active listening, which certainly is a part of it. So engaging our young students in active listening, meaning now I'm listening and I'm reflecting back on what is being said. This has to be done. And then also it's like, what can you think that you could have done differently with that parent? Right? And then after some discussion with that responsible thinking room, we can kind of get to a place. Now that needed to grow because it's just a small approach to our responsible thinking room, which is right here. And I'm going to just do this real quickly. This is an example of our Grand Medicine Lodge. In the sand lines around, this is a major and huge responsible thinking room. And this is where we go from blowing this room up where someone's standing and teaching, where we're actually, if we had a way to rearrange this room, this is how I would have this room arranged, where we're all looking at each other. And when you go to those stones, and hopefully you will get those stones outside, you're going to put those stones on the outside because that's where people sit. Sometimes we sit in clans. Remember, we're getting our stories of our clans, what are our responsibilities. And sometimes we're sitting women on one side, men on another. It kind of depends on the lodge and what's going on. Now, when someone has an issue, they kind of, when they walk into our lodge, they're coming in from this eastern doorway here. That's why I have a yellow stone representing that direction. And we walk in a way, and when you go by, you're going to see a water placement. Water is life. That's a part of justice. Without clean water, Without engineers looking at water and working for water, how can we have life? How can we even start conversations of justice without clean, accessible water? So when we walk by our water placement, this is the province of our women. And so when we're walking by, we see it. And it's held in this beautiful copper because that water came and descended from our celestial world. And as we walk through, there's a way in which we do it, and we have our doorway chiefs. We have our western doorway, our southern doorway. In this eastern direction, we have Chief Justice Murray Sinclair, who was part of the Truth and Reconciliation in Canada. My son would often talk with him. So when someone has an issue, they would come before our lodge, and there might be 50 people, maybe 300. And before that person are two bulls. Now this is the interesting part. When you come in here and walking a certain way, certainly in the middle there's our fire. Our grandfather, respects to him, because also life. And there's that shape of our fire placement in the turtle. So what we have is a person come in, and they can either have someone speak for them or speak for themselves. And when you come with an issue, now you have a choice. Your choice is this. You're going to have these two bulls in front of you. You're the issue, or maybe you have someone that's going to speak for you, and you're going to take that tobacco in your left hand. This is something we use in social services. Instead of telling a judge, F you, I don't believe in your system, because we run into that in social services sometimes, you work with a mom and say, hold this tobacco in your hand, in your left hand, your heart line. Now think about what you'd like to tell the judge. And I'm sure that never happened to the judges in this room. But hold that tobacco, think about your truth and what you really want to say. And so when that person comes in with their issue for themselves or the lodge, they'll take that tobacco, they're holding it because that is how we communicate with God. In your courtrooms, a hand is placed on the Bible and then it's taken off. I think sometimes people take leave of the truth after that particular moment. But when we have tobacco in our hand, the truth is there, your connection to the Creator is there. The moment your very thought happens in prayer, nothing gets in the way of it. But here, you can think about what you're saying, you're taking that moment, you're bringing the issue. Now you can either go to our Grand Chief, which is where this White Rock is, or you can go to the grandmothers, lifetime appointments. Do you have a lifetime appointment? You should have a lifetime appointment. You've been at it for 17 years, right? Only missed 3 meetings, right? So you're gonna stand in front of one of them. Now this is gonna be an interesting choice, because if you had a healthy relationship with your grandmas, that's one thing. And hopefully you did. But if you're going to sit in front of 5 of them, maybe a couple of them change diapers. They know who you are. So when you're going to stand in front of them, you better be straight up. Because with 5 grandmas, they might give you cookies when you're little, but if you're big and being naughty, they're going to have at you. And they got lifetime appointments. So you better be righteous with what's going on. And if you're in front of our Grand Chief, our late Grand Chief, usually he would go and say, not just talk about this issue, tell me where it comes from. What is the origin? Tell me where, because usually when you're dealing with an issue, it's not about the issue itself, it's about something else. And that something else usually comes out to trust. And with individuals, now we're dealing with this. As an individual, do you trust right away? Or does it take time for you to trust? Does it take time for you to trust? And as a Native person, when we're functioning in a room like this, remember, it takes us a little time. Because in rooms like this, our sovereignty, our self-determination, and even our lives are at risk. So that trust is earned. So to get to the place of restorative justice, we must speak of trust and how we get to it.
Well, we'll end on that. We could listen for a lot longer. I know to both of you, you've given us some great examples and lessons. You have an opportunity now for lunch. I don't know whether Christine's going to give me extra 5 minutes or not. No? All right. So this is how she makes the trains run. So if you would be back after lunch at 12:10, We will begin with a presentation. Feel free to talk to the speakers and hopefully build some new relationships. And let's thank them one more time for this great presentation.
Wow. Nice, thank you.
All right, I want to just make an announcement that somebody mentioned, and I think this group might be interested. There apparently is a very good Native American exhibit at the Milwaukee Art Museum right now. So if you're interested, it's the first Native American exhibit they've had at the Art Museum. And wait for people to come in here.
And if they go on Sunday, there's some amazing Native artists from a local school that you might have heard about today that will be presenting there on Sunday.
Oh, really?
Yes, come check that out.
So great. All right, I'm going to introduce our next video speaker. Patrice Kunesh is actually a friend of mine, and I was excited to ask her to come and also be a keynote speaker. And she is a member of the Standing Rock Lakota tribe, and she has had a number of positions working with Native American issues, including she established and led a Center for Indian Country Development at the Federal Reserve Bank in Minneapolis. She has been on the faculty of South Dakota Law School. She has both her Juris Doctorate, that from University of Colorado, and her Master's of Public Administration from Harvard Kennedy School of Government. But most exciting, Patrice has been waiting for about at least 6 months of 8 months for a federal appointment. She's not confirmation. The president nominated her for a position. It's the commissioner of the administration for Native Americans at the Department of Health and Human Services, and it's a position that has to be confirmed by the Senate. And she was nominated, and it dragged on, and then all, you know how Congress is working these days, and it kind of died in December, so the president had to renominate her, and she had every intention of being here, and she contacted us at the end of last week, or the beginning of this week even, and said, oh, they're doing my confirmation hearing this week, and then the next day I'm going to go to the White House and be sworn in. So we asked her if she would be willing to videotape her presentation. So you're going to get to see her, at least on the video. And we're just very proud. Those of us who know her are very proud that she's managed to get through this process. And we wish it had happened at a different time. But because of her vast experience working with Native American communities and others, I think she'll be a very interesting speaker. So,
and Petu washte mitakawapi, Amachi yapi Patrice Kunesh, Wakpa washte awati. Good day, my relatives. I am Patrice Kunesh, an attorney and policy advocate for Native rights. I'm sorry I'm not able to be with you today, but as always, because I always look forward to learning from everyone. As we begin today, I'd like to encourage everyone to take a moment to think about the first time you had a sense of justice. Can you recall the setting, the issue, the people involved? When did you first feel justice, or perhaps injustice? Do you recall how that justice was applied? And did it seem fair to you? For me, I felt the sting of injustice every day growing up. I'm the middle child of 13 brothers and sisters, and I constantly suspected that I was not getting my fair share, or others were getting more than me, or that I was being punished for no good reason. In my teens, I realized that my grievances were really insignificant compared to the injustices endured by my Native relatives. I learned these lessons in different ways. From my mother, I learned that when my grandfather was born on the Fort Berthold Reservation in 1902, he was not considered a citizen of the United States. By the way, Native people did not gain citizenship until 1924. Even then, they still had to fight for ordinary rights. Being Native came with a lot of risks as well. The risk of being separated from family and home, of being sent thousands of miles away to boarding schools, and of not coming home, and a lifetime of poverty and hardship. From my father, I learned that Native people are harmed in unique ways by criminal justice systems. Then and now, American Indians are incarcerated at some of the highest rates. My father served on the parole board at the St. Cloud State Penitentiary. He often reviewed files at our dining room table after dinner, trying to glean an understanding of the lived experiences of those men between the pages. He had to assess their level of remorse, the likelihood of reoffending, and whether they deserved to have their freedom restored. At that time, Native men made up almost half of the inmate population in the St. Cloud State Penitentiary. Most of these men were recent migrants from reservations trying to escape poverty and oppression and searching for jobs and opportunities. They arrived in the big city with no real social compass to navigate their new environment. My Lakota grandfather and his family were among these reservation migrants from Standing Rock to the Twin Cities of St. Paul, Minneapolis. Most of the men in those files were not violent criminals. Their crimes involved vagrancy or loitering and just being a poor Indian. Sitting at my father's elbow as he paged through those files, I saw how formidable systems can hold people down, mete out harsh punishments, and snuff out spirits. But I also discovered an even more powerful force, that of hope and redemption. My father helped introduce vocational programs so the men could learn useful job skills, and then supported cultural practices such as talking circles and smudging ceremonies to help them stay connected to their traditional ways. Through ceremony and education and sharing their stories and dreams, these inmates began to see their lives transformed and their dignity restored. They had hope again. This was the first time I realized that justice could be restored and the hurts healed at both an individual level and as a group. It is the opposite of the punitive approach of our criminal justice systems. A system that heals wounds and demands accountability and restores dignity is incredibly powerful. In my own work with Native communities, I marveled at restorative justice in practice. I'd like to share a few thoughts with you about how Indigenous values animate the process of dispensing justice and restoring relationships. I believe these values of repairing harm, seeking forgiveness, and making reparations can help all of us put things right in our home, our schools, community, environment, and beyond. Brian Stevenson, the author of Just Mercy, often says, let's talk about justice. So let's talk about justice. What is it? It's such an elusive concept, but in its simplest terms, justice is a core human concern for peace, an expression of respect for people, places, and perspectives. It also involves systems and institutions that address wrongdoing, systems involving criminal justice, juvenile justice, environmental justice, social justice, racial justice, and so on. Where does justice come from? It comes from all of us. These systems and institutions of justice reflect our cultural values and shared beliefs about enforcing social norms. For many of us, our first formal encounter with the concept of justice was in church. For example, from the Old Testament, we were taught an eye for an eye in the laws of retaliation. In the New Testament, we learned the Golden Rule, which commands us to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The indigenous roots of justice are wide and deep. One of the earliest known systems is the the Great Law of Peace of the Iroquois Confederacy. This broad sweeping law, adopted hundreds of years ago, unified several warring nations. It actually continues to this day to maintain social order through talking circles and community census. The Iroquois Confederacy, founded by the great peacemaker in 1142, is actually the oldest living participatory democracy on earth. It incorporates concepts of peace, equality, and consensus into its constitution. And inspired by the Great Law of Peace, Benjamin Franklin and James Madison used it as a framework for the US Constitution. Our current criminal institutions use complex tools to define justice. It's a system of retributive justice concerned with three main questions: what law was broken, who broke it, and what punishment is warranted. The indigenous way asks different questions, ones really that are focused on the safety and well-being of the tribe and the intentions of the wrongdoer. We ask, for example, who was harmed? What are the needs and responsibilities of all affected by the wrongdoer? How do the parties together address these harms and repair and restore harmony? This approach is aimed at encouraging the wrongdoer to take responsibility for their actions, repair the harm done through just consequences, rebuild the trust among the parties, and most importantly, reintegrate by reestablishing relationships and to be re-accepted back into the community. Teaching about relational responsibility starts at a very young age by every member of the family and community. It's really all about being a good relative. I'd like to share two examples of Indigenous cultural justice systems that use traditional practices to reimagine a different way of addressing crime and punishment. These are banishment and child welfare. Early in my law career, I was in-house counsel for a small tribe on the East Coast. I worked closely with the tribe's judicial committee and elders council, helping them develop the tribe's court system and tribal laws. A large part of the court docket involved civil actions concerning the tribe's gaming operation, typical things like contracts and torts and personal injuries. The system adopted for these issues closely mirrored state law, complete with rules of evidence and civil procedure. The other system of justice developed for the tribe's criminal cases, those only involving tribal members, was quite different. This is because the tribe's authority over criminal actions is limited by the Federal Indian Civil Rights Act, which allows sentences for only 1 year for any crime. Most of these issues were resolved through talking circles and peacemaking circles. For the most egregious crime, for those for which state remedies were inadequate, sex abuse, drug trafficking, the tribe used its traditional ways to render just consequences for offenses against the community. The tribe adopted a banishment code. In both historic and contemporary contexts, restoring harmony within the family and community was of paramount importance. It actually was a matter of both justice and survival for the tribe. The processes used to deliver this cultural justice are what we today call due process. Tribes have developed unique forms of peacemaking circles, and they all have common goals: dispensing justice and healing, restoring the community. My client used the talking circle model through banishment processes, much like the Ojibwe version of Bidadabang, which we use in the Midwest and throughout Minnesota. The word Bidadabang means new beginning or new day, and it is intended to help parties involved begin a new way of behaving toward one another. The program encourages the wrongdoer to take responsibility for the harm done, be accountable to the community and to the people they have hurt, and make a public apology and amends. The program also helps those who have been harmed by getting closure and restitution for their injuries. The process of banishment consists of bringing the parties together into a circle. Family and community members also attend the circle. When the circle begins, then the talking begins. The wrongdoer talks about what they did, why they did it, and takes responsibility for their actions. Anyone impacted by the wrongdoing has an opportunity to share their story as well. The group talks about what is needed to be done to make things right and restore harmony and balance. A healing plan is developed and formalized into an agreement signed by both the wrongdoer and the Elders' Council. The gathering ends with a ceremony. Thereafter, the council monitors compliance with the agreement and holds a ceremonial celebration once restitution is complete. The talking circle process applies to a wider range of issues, from theft, drugs, assault, and juvenile delinquency issues. The worst possible punishment is banishment. Excluding a person from the community is like treating them as though they have no family. Historically, if someone had no family, they could not survive on their own. They would try to find another family to be part of. Excluding someone from the community, cutting them away from their family, and leaving them without resources would be akin to a death sentence. Today, banishment still has serious social and economic repercussions. They are cut off from family, home, and work. But now, of course, there are other means to survive outside the tribal community, but they're cut away from their culture and their community is really the worst consequence. Banishment isn't necessarily permanent. Part of the transformative effects of cultural justice is forgiveness. If the offender has been genuinely contrite, apologetic, and ceases the offending conduct, they could be restored into the community, often on a probationary basis, while they earn back the trust of the community. Reintegration into the community and being reunited with family are celebrated in ceremony, and having peace and harmony restored are really good cause for celebration any day. Let's talk about child welfare. Did you know that trees of the same species are communal? Forest trees have evolved to live in cooperative, independent relationships. Forest trees have evolved to live in cooperative, interdependent relationships, maintained by communication and a collective intelligence. Without this relationship, new saplings are vulnerable to disease and climatic distress. If severed from their underground lifelines, trees are much more likely to die than their networked counterparts. Like the forest systems, native families are part of an ancient, intricate society that is connected, communicative, and interdependent. Modern child welfare practices, rooted in individualistic, property-based framework, fail to account for the profound influence of extended family on the well-being of children and the community. My colleagues in the Indigenous Peace Initiative at the Native American Rights Fund have taken a lesson from the forest to encourage states to shift their view of parents and families as isolated actors, to seeing them as part of an extended support network with interacting parts and responsibilities. This approach uses talking circles to get to the root cause of the problem and share information. But mainly, it is about ensuring responsibility and accountability of the whole system to the child. Family talking circles and decision-making circles follow a familiar process of gathering together all the stakeholders, including family members, child protection services, and court staff, and all share their perspectives on the problems and try to address the difficult issues concerning child neglect and abuse. Their paramount goal is ensuring the best interest of the child and preserving the family wherever possible. They explore underlying trauma, impediments of poverty, mental health challenges, and mistrust of the court system. They also then consider different ways to provide the services needed to the families and their children for supporting and doing whatever it takes to make the family system work. These responsibilities are not taken lightly. Courts and child protection programs that have incorporated a family systems approach to their children's court processes have found significant benefits. First and foremost, talking circles have shown better results in preserving Native families and improving child well-being. Perhaps this is because the process delves into the real issues that trigger neglectful behavior, requires owning the negligent conduct, and then targets services and actions to those particular problems. Second, the circle adds direct accountability into adversarial child welfare cases with minimal risk or cost. While courts are focused on burden of proof and compliance, the talking circles seek accountability for the harm and assurances of remediation and reparation. And third, talking circles count as state-required active efforts in Indian child welfare proceedings. Court processes that use talking circles to help address child welfare concerns and resolve these kind of disputes are finding lasting outcomes, likely because the whole community has a vested interest in seeing it succeed. So now I'd like to just share a few other ways that tribes are restoring justice and community well-being, and how they are incorporating restorative justice practices into the whole community and social infrastructure. In fact, they are infusing their communities with processes that build equitable and peaceful resolutions and incorporating trauma-informed design into their services. And they're building better support systems from the ground up. Not surprisingly, tribes that make community well-being a priority experience better social outcomes and economic stability. For example, in the Dakota language, there is no word for child or children. Instead, there is Wakanyeya, which means sacred little one. The Oglala Sioux tribe of the Pine Ridge Reservation has overhauled its children's code and replaced it with a comprehensive outline of traditional rights and responsibilities of families toward these sacred little ones. The new law uses non-judicial processes such as talking circles to help address family problems more holistically. The Navajo are also using talking circles as a way of restoring relationships. This Navajo practice embraces the concept that means something like people talking together to reform relationships with each other and the universe. I'll need my Navajo friends to tell us more about that concept. In Hawaii, the Imakuna Ana youth circles are focused on youth at a time of great uncertainty and instability when they exit foster care. The Hawaiian term Imakua Ana literally means becoming an adult. The youth circles come together to celebrate this transition, which often is fraught with involvement with the criminal justice or juvenile justice system. Attending the circle are young people, social workers, children's services, and family members, all of whom work together to support an enhanced sense of well-being, belonging, and interconnectedness, with a healthy dose of responsibility for their community. The Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe here in Minnesota recently established a family healing wellness court called Nijumo Wikamig Inana Wagamag, which means healing journey in Ojibwe. And as you can tell, I am not good at pronouncing Ojibwe. The Red Lake Nation celebrated an opening of a new building recently with hopes that it will inspire a new era of community well-being. The nation redesigned its child and family services program and renamed it to an Ojibwe word that means uplifting our relatives. And it is housed in a new facility that is called the Intergenerational Services Building, rather than human services or child protection services. And in the Pacific Northwest, the Lummi tribe has designed the Schlegenan Village, a co-housing community with the mission of preserving and protecting Native families by providing an opportunity for families to make transformational life changes. The word Schlegenan actually means way of life in Lummi, and it represents the tribe's essential philosophy and its intentions for residents of the village to be sheltered and protected. In conclusion, I'd like to leave you all with a few thoughts about connections and forgiveness. There seems to be a sum zero quality to our culture these days, everything or nothing, along with a lot of tactics to stir mistrust and contempt, and worst of all, violence. To bridge the abyss of fear and break the culture of contempt, social science research tells us that we really need to find common elements that bring us together and make connections. We can do this quite easily by telling stories, essentially by talking to each other. The talking circles I've just discussed have transformed lives. And while a large part of that is acknowledging one's own wrongdoing, the more powerful force, I believe, is forgiveness. Accepting an apology that seeks forgiveness requires letting go of resentment and anger, letting go of justified reasons for mistrust and contempt and revenge is really an act of love and an act of grace. It's about love in the truest understanding of the golden rule, to love your neighbor as yourself. It's about grace because it saves lives and restores hope, much like the Native American prisoners I saw in my father's files. When we can have hope, even in the hard times and bleak circumstances, we can reverse downward spirals and create a virtual cycle of connections and relationships with more love and less fear. That is what we need more of: forgiveness and harmony and love. And we also need restorative justice focused leaders like all of you. So thank you for your time and attention today. Wopila Tanka. Thank you very much.